You're listening to episode 151, Cindy and Gavin's story, a son with osteosarcoma. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Child Life on Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories, and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here. Hello, my friends. I'm so happy that you're here today. Today, I get to talk with Gavin and Cindy. They are parents to Ryan, Ashley, and Katie. And a number of years ago, their son was diagnosed with cancer. And much like any other parent who is faced with having your child go through an experience that you don't have much control over, you look for ways to make their life a little bit brighter. And Cindy did that by pairing her love of sewing with doing what she could to make Ryan's hospital room look better. And she started Ryan's Case for Smiles and started with this one hamburger pillowcase and has now donated over 2 million pillowcases to families who are facing similar experiences. This is also a really special episode because we have such a unique perspective from Ryan's dad, Gavin, who actually was working in the same hospital that Ryan was receiving care at. He started his first day at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia at the same time that Ryan was receiving treatment. So I'm so grateful to Gavin and Cindy for being here, and I am so honored to share their story with you. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you guys know that if you are a parent, a child life specialist, or professional working with children, you're going to want the hospital or physician's office or urgent care that you take your kids to have the Child Life On Call app. It is an evidence-based tool designed to empower children and families during medical experiences. And 100% of the child life specialists who have used this app believe that it can help with expanding child life's reach beyond the bedside. And 100% of child life specialists believe it helps parents feel more empowered in their child's care. Learn how to get the Child Life On Call app for your facility or doctor's office by going to childlifeoncall.com/partners.
Hello, everybody. I am Cindy Kerr, and Gavin is with me, my husband. We live in Wayne, Pennsylvania. We have 3 children. We have Ashley, who is 38, Katie, who is 35, and Ryan, who passed away in 2008, who would be 32. We have a dog, Bailey.
I was able to connect to you guys through your wonderful daughter, Katie, who is just a gem, and she and I connected. My father and I have Child Life On Call. He's my co-founder. And so we talked a lot about having our parents as our business partners and how fun that can be.
I can imagine what she said.
Fun and complicated at times.
I was just thinking that last night when I wanted to talk business over baseball last night. And I was like, well, probably not tonight. Well, I have just loved getting to connect with Katie and learn about Ryan's Case for Smiles. And this podcast is really designed for parents who are kind of at that beginning phase of finding out that something is going on with their child. They're kind of thrown into this new medical world. And so hearing from parents, especially a mom and dad team as strong as the two of you, about your experience and what it's been like is really helpful. So I appreciate you being here today.
We're glad to help.
And our heart goes out to everybody who's going through this for the first time. It is really hard.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, why don't one of you just start off by kind of introducing us into what happened with Ryan and kind of the time leading up to finding out that something was going on with him?
Sure. So when Ryan was a very active kid. He played soccer and was an inline extreme skater and played lacrosse, and he just was always going. And he was riding his bike and he fell, and his knee was really bothering him. So Cindy took him to our primary care doctor, and we took x-rays, and when the doctor came back in the room with Cindy and Ryan there, he inappropriately said, "Ryan, do you see this shadow here? That's cancer." And that was the beginning of our journey. We went to a specialist in osteosarcoma, which is what Ryan had, in an adult system, and he got good care. We went through, chemo and surgery, and the tumor hadn't gotten really shrunken much by the chemo, so that was concerning. Finished his chemo, and he went into remission for about 18 months, and then suddenly he was back getting a CT scan, and the tumors were back and had metastasized, and so that started really a consistent process of probably the next 4 years of treatment and things. The sort of odd experience we had was that I was the chief operating officer of the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, so my first day on the job was his first day after his first recurrence. And so we kind of had a parallel journey of work and family that he and I and Cindy were a part of.
Oh my goodness, that's quite coincidental that those things happen on the same day. What did it? I'm sure just a whole level of passion and meaning that went to your work, but probably feeling like you wanted to be in two places at once.
Yeah, though it's a lot better being in the same campus than it is being far away, but it was exhausting because I always had to be clear about which role I was in. Was I the dad or was I the chief operating officer? And people were incredibly gracious, and I learned more about being a good healthcare leader by being on the other side of the bed than I had in all the years of doing that work before then. So, but it was difficult for everybody, but it is for every family that goes through this. And nobody who goes through it gets off easy, that's for sure.
Yeah. Cindy, how did you handle those beginning phases? And I can only imagine how difficult being in the room with a pediatrician who says, "Ryan, you have cancer," and just what that was like.
Yeah, it was because, I have to say I was even kidding with him because he went in for the x-ray and he came out, and then they called him in again they said, "Oh, we want to x-ray the other leg." And, Ryan said something to me, and we always had this, fun relationship. I said, "Oh, they're probably going to cut off your leg." I mean, what a horrible thing to say now, right? And then to have him be sitting there at 12 years old and the doctor right there telling him he had cancer. I called Gavin at work. He came over, and we started the process. And then I remember he was supposed to start chemo like 2 weeks later, and he had a sore throat. And the practice we were in, the pediatrician, they had all different, doctors. You didn't know who you would get. And I called and I said, "I will take any doctor but this one." And wouldn't you know, that's the only one that was on call. And at that point, again, he said to me in front of Ryan, "Oh, which bone cancer does he have? The really bad one?" And so after that, I mean, we're not people that really make a stir, but we just asked that perhaps he might need some type of, counseling on how to address a family and their child who has just been diagnosed. And, it happened to be that it was his first time having to tell a parent their child had cancer. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, and then, we obviously went from there and just thrown into the whole, every 3 weeks being in the hospital for a week, and trying to navigate all that.
How did you handle the stress of kind of balancing, making sure Ryan was where he needed to be, yet you have, Katie and Ashley at home too? And how did you manage all of that?
It was really difficult. So I would be in the hospital with Ryan. If we were in over the weekends, Gavin would come in and do the weekends. We always made sure that someone was home at night. When Ryan was diagnosed, Ashley, our oldest one, had gone off to college. So she was calling us every day, but she wasn't here to experience it. Katie was the one kind of left behind, at home. And even though one of us was here at night, what became difficult was, if she got sick at school, sorry, there's our dog.
No problem.
Then, I had to have a friend go pick her up.
Right.
I couldn't be there for her. And it was, I felt torn apart by that. And, we managed that the first time around, the first year, but then when he relapsed, I think it just became more and more difficult for Katie and, for us.
That makes a lot of sense, because it's that constant wanting to be with one child and wanting to be with other, and having to make the impossible decision to have to choose one, which so many families do. And so hearing you validate that is really, really helpful.
I'd just like to add that parents going through this need to be really willing to forgive themselves, because it's such a difficult task. You can't be everything to everybody. And so all you can do is the very best you can do. And that's okay. Even though, you'd like to be perfect, you just can't do it.
And we didn't realize that at the time, though, trust me. I mean, it's just, I think, looking back, that we can start forgiving ourselves for some of those things.
Well, I think just bringing that up like you have now for those families who are in those initial stages, now they have that in the back of their mind to just go easy on yourself. I think you're right, because there is no right or wrong decision. There's only just what has to be done.
Right.
Exactly.
What do you think helped Ryan the most during that time? What helped him get through some of the hard parts?
I have to say, so here's kind of a funny thing is when he was told he was going to have to do chemotherapy, he was all excited because he had wanted an Xbox for a really long time, and we wouldn't get him one, and we got him an Xbox. And, he thought it was going to be, he's going to get room service, and, that all, he kind of realized it wasn't as rosy as he thought it was going to be. But I think just being there for him, being very open with him. I mean, we didn't tell him the nitty gritty of some of this stuff and kind of the reality of it, but trying to be as open as possible for him, trying to make sure that we kept his life, as much as, again, we had friends, we had, the guys come for poker night at the hospital when they could, trying to have him go to school, but his chemotherapy was so, difficult that it became hard for him to go, and it almost made it more difficult for him to kind of be in and out. So we ended up just doing, having tutors come at home or come to the hospital. And, I think, what was important for him, he used to always say, what was hardest for him was how others treated him, especially in school. He said some of the kids they weren't my friend before, and now because I was the cancer kid, they kind of wanted to be nice to me or be my friend, or they just, even my good friends treated me differently. And he said, I'm still Ryan. I'm the same Ryan I always was, and I just want people, adults and children, to treat me the same way.
That's such profound thoughts coming from a 12-year-old, and so important, because I totally hear what he's saying, right? It's like suddenly you're popular because you have cancer, or suddenly the friends you thought were your friends aren't anymore. I think that's pretty common experience.
Yep, I think it absolutely so.
I think getting out and playing sports that he could play.
Yeah.
He took up golf, which he wound up being much better than I would have. We connected him with the Center for Adapted Sports, and he became a mono skier or a sit skier, and that made the winters really, really fun, and he got quite good at it. We tried to find as many ways as we could to help him be the athlete that he had always been. So that was a big part of it. I think he had a network of friends through the internet that he developed playing World of Warcraft that became a really incredibly important connection for him to the world, because he would have months where he couldn't connect with people, outside the house. And he had a couple of really good friends who just really did everything they could to help Ryan live a normal life. And, I'm so appreciative of them and what they meant to Ryan, and I think what Ryan meant to them as well.
Are you two able to keep in touch with them? Are there families anymore?
Yes, we have. So, and it's interesting how many people have, it was actually very difficult for a long time after Ryan passed, because it's hard to see what his other friends are going off to college, his friends are getting married. And so it was one of those things where, it was really great to stay connected, but also really difficult. But yes, we have stayed in touch with some of them. And actually, the two that he was closest to spoke at his funeral.
Oh, wow. I would love to hear a little bit more about after Ryan passed and you guys began this incredible journey with Ryan's Case for Smiles, and where that was born from, and really what it's turned into now.
So I guess that's probably me, as I'm Gavin looking at me. Well, it's interesting. It started just with when Ryan was going to go in for his first treatment. And, as a mom, you want to do something for your child, but I couldn't heal him. I couldn't, cure him. And I'm a quilter, a sewer. And so I made him a fun pillowcase that had hamburgers on it. And that was, to be on his bed. And I wanted to make his room seem a little more like home. And so every time he went in for treatment, he would get a new pillowcase, and it was fun for him to wait and see what it was. It was a great conversation starter with the doctors and nurses. And so for that first year he was in treatment, that's what I did. And then when he had a relapse and he had a surgery that night, Gavin stayed with him in the hospital, and my daughter and I came home, and we sewed 30 pillowcases and took them back to Children's Hospital Philadelphia, where he's being treated, for the other kids on the floor. And of course, they're a big hit. So my friends would make pillowcases, and I would make some. And then when we would go in for our next treatment, we would take them. And so we did that. Ryan had several relapses, but we kept, making the pillowcases. And at some point, my brother started a chapter, or started doing it for a hospital at Yale New Haven. Wow. Brian's godmother did it for a hospital in New Jersey. And then we ended up going to be on the Martha Stewart show.
Oh, wow.
And the day I found that out was we had literally just walked in the door, and to finding out that Ryan we were going to have to do, that Ryan was terminal, and we were going to be doing hospice. And the phone rang, and they're like, "Hi, this is the Martha Stewart show. You won." And I'm like, "Okay, what kind of joke is this?" Because I knew nothing about it. And hung up, called me back, and it turns out Gavin had entered a contest of dreamers into doers, and it was the first time Martha Stewart did this, and they had chosen us to be on the show. And they wanted Ryan to come. They came to our house and filmed, and you can imagine this all when you just find out your child is, not going to survive. And we were on the show. Ryan actually was able to make it, and the next day we had 400, emails, calls of people wanting to join us to do it for their communities. And so while I would sit in Ryan's room with him, we'd be setting up chapters across the country. And that's kind of how it all began. And I have to say, what was very difficult, it really helped me heal, introduced me to a lot of different people. And I was back sewing in the hospital with the kids, I think a couple weeks after Ryan passed. And I look back and think, how did I do that? But, he's sort of on my shoulder. He's right there helping me.
It seems like it was really a form of your coping that just kind of happened naturally through, your skills, what you have as a mom, what your son needed, and turned into something so beautiful.
Right. And, it is. It's that, it's interesting. I would, I go talk to, kindergarten, elementary schools, high schools, whatever. And several of the things I talk about is what we talked about previously is that, if you have somebody different in your classroom, they're still the same person if they, can't walk or they can't hear or whatever. You don't have to be famous to do anything, to do something for someone else. And yes, I was doing this for my son, and, now 2.5 million pillowcases later, and our other resources, this is where it's gone. But I'm not a movie star. I'm not anybody like that. And it also doesn't matter if you do, make 200 million or millions of pillowcases, or if it's just one, you're affecting the, life and helping someone else. But I also think to this, there are so many families that after their child dies, want to start something and want to do something. And it is pretty overwhelming. And I think you have to really watch, what you take on.
I think that's really good advice.
And I'd also say that for a while, it really pulled us along versus we were leading it. After the Martha Stewart show, there were just so many volunteers and so many people wanting to help. And so from an organizational point of view, it just flourished. From a personal point of view, in some ways it was both incredibly healing and satisfying and gave a purpose. But at the time, we were exhausted. It takes about 2 years to even get your feet under you after you lose a child, I think. And so, there's a lot of that that's just a blur, at least for me.
Yeah, and I definitely, I talked about this with other people. I think definitely the second year is always harder than the first year. And I think the first year you're in such a, you're dreading every holiday and that type of thing. But it's still not real that they're completely gone. And then the second year, it's just like, boom, this is reality.
Have you been able to connect with other parents through the Case for Smiles that, and really sit with them and just be in a community where people understand what you're going through?
Yes. I think that's what's been wonderful in the Philadelphia chapter here pre-COVID. For the last, 15 years, we would also take our sewing machines in and go sew in the hospital with the kids. They would make their own pillowcase, and we, would do it in the clinic or other places. And then there would be children that couldn't come out of their rooms in isolation. So I would gown up, take the sewing machine, and we'd sew. And it was a great time. Obviously, the children enjoyed it. But, for a parent to see your child smile when you're in that environment, and to have somebody else who's gone through it be able to talk to you, and sort of, it was healing for them and it was healing for me. And I think one of the things that really struck me was I actually, I guess it's been 5 years ago, was diagnosed with cancer, and I've been battling it for 5 years. And I was sewing with this little boy, and he was having, he was exhausted, and he said, "Oh, I overdid it yesterday, but they tell me I shouldn't do stuff, but I just have to do it. And I'm like, I totally get that. I do the same thing. And then he said something about his port. And I said, I have a port too. So we, showed each other our ports. And I thought, this is sort of like, in some ways, market research. I was, in marketing pre-children. But, I wish I didn't have cancer. I wish I didn't go through all this stuff. But boy, can I relate to, everything that they're going through. And if I can help them in some little way, it just makes me feel good inside too.
Well, I'm so sorry for all that you have been going through in the past 5 years. And I just keep thinking about the catalyst of this impact you started with that one hamburger pillowcase.
Yeah.
And I mean, it makes me smile. My son loves hamburgers, so I'm going to be thinking about Ryan every time we have a hamburger. And that's just the effect that Ryan is now having on so many people because of the way that he's impacted you as parents. And I'm just so grateful.
He never wanted it to be about him. So we, we talk about him as our story, but we, try to focus, not make it completely about him. And I think, we talk about the pillowcases, but I think given our experience, being in the hospital, and when we were back in the hospital, there were no computers in the rooms. If you wanted to use a computer, you had to sit in the hallway. And, it's 2 a.m. and you're like, struggling with something, and, the social workers aren't around, or, somebody to talk to. And so you try to get online and you try to look for stuff and, to help you. And there really wasn't at that time. And also felt like we were fairly together. I mean, I don't know if we were looking back, but there were such limited staff that we felt that we didn't want to bother a social worker or a child life specialist because there were so many other people that needed it. And so that's why one of the reasons which led us to start, developing kind of our coping site and, resources for families, and, sort of helping them build resilience no matter where they were in the process. One of the things that somebody once told me, a friend, and he's like, well, I don't quite get these pillowcases. He said, but what I see is, a couple who have gone through so much and have come out of it and have built resilience. And I think that's what I think is important for every family or every parent going through this, is that some way or another you're going to come out of this. Your life will never be the same. Hopefully your child survives, but you will build a new kind of resilience that you never really realized you had.
We really designed it as Cindy said. It's 2 a.m., you're at wit's end. You really need something to give you some help in getting through it. And you're sitting, alone in the room with your child. And so we wanted to have resources that were research-based, that could be at any parent's fingertips at any time, at any point in the crisis. And so that was really Cindy's vision for coping space. And, we've made real progress in getting there, but it's a work in progress.
I think what you bring up about that evidence-based piece and research-based piece is so important, because Google is endless and the forums can be endless. But when you have that safe space to go to, you can have some confidence in what you're looking at. And then that helps you find your voice with the healthcare workers too. I think the next time the doctors come in the room, you feel like you have something to lean on to. How did you guys find your voice during that time? I know at the beginning it's really overwhelming, but how did you see yourselves transform from kind of bystander to Ryan's advocate?
No, it was a little different, I think, for us, because I was in healthcare. And so I was much more comfortable with the environment, with the many, many people who take care of your children, and with sort of the intimidation factor of working with these incredible physicians and nurses. So becoming an advocate was more like being a colleague for me. And that made it a whole lot easier. But there were also times when it was intimidating. And so ultimately we reached a point where we knew we had to do whatever was going to be most helpful to Ryan. we tried, as Cindy said, to give him voice in the process. We never wanted it to be something that was being done around him. Those, as she said, we didn't give him all the details, but giving him some sense of choice and the ability to be his own advocate. There were a few times when he became a little too much of his own advocate, and we had to get him to calm.
Oh, I want to hear about those. Do you have an example?
He was more of a prankster.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, in
gosh.
the middle of the night, and not to be disgusting, but the nurse comes to, empty his, urinal, and he's put a spider in there, or he pretends he's sound asleep when they come to check his ID, and he jumps up and scares them. So.
Oh my God,
yeah.
That's amazing.
But yeah, I think I mean, for me, because I wasn't as comfortable about as Gavin, having not been in the healthcare, but just, that is one of the things, is how hard do you push, for your child. I would do anything for Ryan, but I also knew, you have the doctors and nurses know somewhat what they're doing too. But, I think for the most part, there were one or two times where, I really just had to, say, no, this is what I believe, and we really need to, push for it.
The other part of it is just being present. The health system is so complicated. Yeah. There are so many people involved in care, and the communication, the handoffs don't always happen perfectly. And so having a parent there, if it is at all possible, and I know it's not possible for everybody, but having someone there who can make sure that those handoffs happen well, and, even the very best of places like Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, errors get made, and an attentive parent can help ensure that those things don't ever get to the child. And so part of it's being an advocate, part of it's just being really aware and recognizing that it's an imperfect process with wonderful imperfect people. And so being attentive to that, feeling comfortable saying, gee, I don't think that feels right, can be really powerful.
I love that, because you're giving some specific advice about those handoffs specifically. And I also think being present at rounds, and, if you can pick these bits and pieces to be there, and maybe it's not every day, maybe it's not every other day, but at some points to just be around when those things happen can be really helpful.
Yeah. Right. And I think it's really overwhelming in the beginning, because, everything is an acronym, and everything is, and
sure.
Boy, do you learn pretty quickly, and you learn how to turn off the pump in the middle of the night when it's beeping, and pause it. And, for those people who are just parents who are just starting out, it is so overwhelming. But, write down your questions, and, trust me, you're going to learn that stuff before you know it.
The other thing that Cindy and I have noticed is the evolution of the way hospitals are designed. When Ryan was first in, there were semi-private and private rooms, the parents always kind of gathered around where the snack food was, or the coffee or things. And so there was a nice network of relationships. People kept their doors open. Now, I think with the move towards individual rooms and with computers in each of the rooms, it's very easy for parents to get isolated from other people. And so I really encourage families that are newly diagnosed to introduce themselves to some of the other parents. It becomes a wonderful support network. And, I remember a few instances where, there were children who were going through a really hard time, and just being able to be there and listen while the parents were talking about what was happening, and to be a shoulder to cry on was really valuable for them and for us.
Thank you for bringing that up. I couldn't agree more. It's part of the reason that this podcast began, right? Is I had this interaction with a mom, and she looked at me and said, please tell me someone else has gone through this before. And I so badly just wanted to knock on the neighbor's door and say, can you come over? And we couldn't do that. And I thought, I could put a podcast in her ear. But I think what you're bringing up about that person to person connection that we still can do in the cafeteria. You can, say hi, smile. It may not be the first time you do it, but maybe the second or third time you start to see the same faces, you can really foster that relationship.
Yeah. And it's really priceless.
I would love to know, as we're kind of finishing up here, one of my favorite questions is, I'd love to hear from each of you, and we'll start with you, Gavin. What Ryan taught you about yourself, maybe that you didn't know before you became his dad?
That's a wonderful question. I think he taught me a lot about smiling and laughing through hard times. He taught me a lot about savoring moments and not being so focused on the future that you forget the little things that matter, like a really great hug or a wonderful smile. And he taught me that no matter how hard life gets, it keeps going on, whether he's here or not. And he taught me that whenever the clock says 333 or 444, to say jinx. And so these days, every time it happens, I think of him. And that's a wonderful gift he gave me.
I love that. What about you, Miss Cindy?
I think, again, he taught me, not to stress. I used to be such a control freak, and definitely, you lose a lot of control when you go through this. And how to persevere through things, difficult times. As I'm going through my own cancer journey, I think, wow, he did this with humor and smile, and so I try to do that. If it wasn't we don't want everybody to believe he was this perfect child, because trust me, from 12 to when he passed away at 17, he was, a typical boy. But, even the teachers or the kids at school would say, wow, he eventually had his leg amputated, and he would still be going through the hallway with a smile. It was very important for him that we kept on living. And, so I think about that, because there's so many times I just want to curl up and sit in the corner, and I think, you know what? Ryan wouldn't want that for us. And I think the most poignant thing I can think of is he was given about, a month to live, and he ended up surviving about 6 months. And it was Christmas, and we thought he was close to passing away. And so we hadn't done any Christmas shopping. And so 2 days before, we're out buying Christmas presents. And we were laying in bed that night, and he said, wow. He said, even though I'm dying and I won't be able to use much of this, you really thought of the most thoughtful gifts. It was like warm socks. It was something that like one of those wooden little tables that, sit above, you can lay in bed and work on. And he said, this has just been the best Christmas ever. And I thought, he said, just being all together. And I thought, wow, here's a 17-year-old saying that to me, given everything he's going through. So, I kind of remember that. And, it's not about the stuff we have in life. It's, it's about the relationships and the love we have for one another.
Well, I am so grateful that I got to listen to you two, especially speak together, is incredibly endearing. It's not easy on any relationships, much less a marriage, when you go through something like this. So thank you both for speaking so honestly and speaking with me today. We mentioned coping space, and we've talked about Ryan's case for smiles, but there's another section, the Just Sibs, that I would love to hear a little bit about before we close.
Just Sibs came out of our experience of, specifically or mainly, from having Katie at home. Although Ashley was away at college, and she sort of put everything in a box and didn't deal with it until she was writing her dissertation, and then it sort of all came out. But realizing that the siblings, or sort of the forgotten ones, Katie used to always talk about, she wasn't Katie when people talked to her. She was Ryan's sister, or, Ashley's sister. And it was always asked, how's your brother? And so as hard as we tried to make her life as normal as possible, it was not. And, a lot of times Ryan got away with things he probably shouldn't have because he was sick. So we wanted to develop a site where siblings could come and have some interactive videos that would help them cope. We developed coping boxes. The patient, the child that's sick is always getting the gifts. And so we developed our coping boxes, which are a fun gift for the siblings, but each item in the box has a powerful tool, a coping tool. One of the best cases is, okay, so you tell a little child, you're anxious, just breathe, take deep breaths, but they don't understand that. But if they blow bubbles, that's sort of the same, kind of produces that same deep breathing. So we're really trying to delve into helping the whole family, and we feel that, I think from research, what we found is that siblings have the highest rate of post-traumatic stress, more so than the parents or the actual child that's sick. So we really want to help them figure out how to go through this whole journey with the family.
Well, you are all just wonderful, and Katie, Ryan, and Ashley are so lucky to have you as their parents.
Well, thank you. They may not think that all the time, but
well, we'll just have them listen to this episode over and over again, though, until they do. Well, I appreciate you guys.
Well, thank you so much.
I look forward to communicating and just supporting everything about Ryan's Case for Smiles.
All right. Well, spread the word. Katie. We love it. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. All right. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Child Life On Call podcast. I'm your host, Katie Taylor, and you can follow us at Child Life On Call on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please rate and review to make it easier for other families to find us. We have cute merch available at www.bonfire.com/store/childlifeoncall, and you can listen to more episodes and find resources at childlifepodcast.com.